Everybody, it's 12:30, so I think we're going to get started. It's great to see so many of you here. This is a little bit of an experiment. This is the first time we're doing something like this, and we've got 18 people attending. I know two of those people are staff members, but that's okay. It's still a really nice bunch of people. So I do recognize some of your names, but there's some new names as well. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Emily Parker. I'm the Director of Education here at the Rosenbach. And today, in honor of Poetry Month, we're going to be taking a virtual sneak peek into the Rosenbach's collection of Emily Dickinson material. So the documents that we're going to be looking at in a minute are part of a Behind the Bookcase tour that is focused on her. And when the Rosenbach opens back up, I really invite you to participate in that tour. I'd really love to meet you all in person. But until then, I've included some images of the Rosenbach on this first slide. So there's the exterior of the Rosenbach, and then there is Abraham Rosenbach's private library, that shot on the right-hand side at the bottom. And then my virtual background, which, as I said in the chat, I would love to say that this is actually my home, but this is a virtual background, and this is a wall of bookshelves from Abraham Rosenbach's private library. So I hope that kind of helps us sort of feel that we're back in the Rosenbach. So I'd love for today to be a conversation about what we're looking at. So if you have a question or a comment or would like to respond to one of my questions, please feel free to write it in the chat window. I'll give you all some time after I ask a question or after we look at something, just giving you time to be able to type that in there. And then what I'll do is I'll just share that with everybody before responding, just so everybody is aware of what's been said, so that you don't have to constantly follow along with the chat window. I'll say the question or comment out loud. But if there is anyone who just wants to kind of follow along and not participate, I'm not going to call on anybody. So if you would just like to sort of follow along and just quietly listen to the presentation, that's completely fine too. You do not have to participate other than just listening and looking as we go along. So I wanted to start with this image of Emily that you see on your screen right now, because it's likely the one that comes to mind when you think of her. She's one of the most famous American poets, so that you likely learned something about her in school. So what I wanted you to do now, if you feel comfortable, is I wanted you to just share in the chat window what you remember about what you learned about her in school. And I'll just give you a moment to share that. And there's no right or wrong answers here. Okay, so Kathy says that she remembers learning that Emily Dickinson was a recluse. And Peter says he remembers learning there is no frigate like a book, full stop. Someone else says that they remember her as a quiet, contained person. Someone else says she lived a private life. Ed says that she was quiet and secretive. Guy says that sadly, when they were in school, Emily Dickinson was not yet a great American poet, and he didn't actually read her in school. Brett mentions that he remembers learning that she wrote over 1,000 poems. Judith says when we were told in high school that her father wouldn't let her marry. Oh, and then Guy follows up by saying that he's showing his age with his previous comment. Oh, and then Sue says she went to Mount Holyoke and lived in the Dickinson dorm and toured her home several times. I actually grew up in Williamstown, Massachusetts, so not that far away. And my father worked at Amherst for a while. And then Dennis says, the last comment here, he found that her poetry was just so tangible. So a lot there. I mean, I think a lot of you have some kind of connection or memory with her, memory of Emily. So as many of you mentioned, she's really long been presented as kind of a quiet recluse. I wanted to just read a section of an intro to an edition of her poetry that was published back in the 1960s. So the author writes, her birthplace was Amherst, a quiet village in the Connecticut Valley of Massachusetts, nearly 100 miles from Concord and Cambridge in space, and at least half that number of years in time. Here she lived a life outwardly uneventful, inwardly dedicated to a secret and self-imposed assignment, the mission of writing a letter to the world that would express in poems of absolute truth and of the utmost economy her concepts of life and death, of love and nature. So this intro, I think, really reflects a lot of the things that you all remembered learning about her. This idea of being quiet. The author of this intro uses words like quiet, uneventful, inwardly dedicated, secret, self-imposed, utmost economy. So I think it's really been the way that she's been presented, in the past. But recently, some directors have actually gotten pretty creative about reinventing Emily's image. On the left-hand side of your screen, there's an advertisement for a show called Wild Nights with Emily. It actually stars Molly Shannon as Emily Dickinson. And this one, this show is particularly focused on her romance, Emily's romance with her sister-in-law, Susan Gilbert. And then on the right-hand side of your screen is a TV series. It's actually on Apple TV, and it's starring Haley Steinfeld. And again, really kind of reinvents her image. Book Riot describes this TV series as Emily being not only queer, but also a rebel who disappoints her father, frightens her mother, wears trousers, is a dramatic teenager, makes rude gestures, performs in cabaret shows, plays a cardboard banjo, dances like she's at the Bronze, and dresses up like she's in the circus. So at first it kind of seems like maybe these producers of these different programs have taken a lot of liberties in their recasting of Emily. But actually, based on a letter that we have in our collection, in the Rosenbach's collection, it seems that Emily was in fact much more spirited than a lot of people really expect. So our first document from the Rosenbach's collection that we're going to take a close look at is a letter that Emily wrote to her friend Jane Humphrey in 1842 when Emily was 11 years old. So Jane Humphrey had actually lived with the Dickinsons while both of them attended Amherst Academy. And after Jane moved away, they continued to write to each other for many, many years. So what we're looking at on the left-hand side of your screen is the first page of the letter, so the full text of the first page. And then just because I really wanted you to have a look at Emily's handwriting, I included a close-up of the first, basically the first paragraph of the letter on the right-hand side of your screen. So the letter is really long, but if you will permit me, I'd like to read the whole thing just because I was trying to find excerpts to read for you, and it's just all so good that it was difficult to find something to pull out of it. So it's Amherst, May 12th, 1842. My dear Jane, I have been looking for a letter from you this long time, but not receiving any. I plucked up all the remaining courage that I had left and determined to make one more effort to write you a few lines. I want to see you very much, for I have got a great deal to tell you about school matters. And besides, you are one of my dear friends. Sabra Howe has had a beautiful ring given to her by Charles. You know who as well as I do. The examination at East Hampton is today, and Austin is coming home tonight. Father is sick with rheumatism and cannot go, but mother has gone with somebody else. It is very unpleasant today. It showers most all the time. Your sister is very well indeed. I believe she has gone to South Hadley this afternoon. I miss you more and more every day, in my study, in play, at home, indeed everywhere. I miss my beloved Jane. I wish you would write to me. I shall think more of it than a mine of gold. When you write me, I wish you would write me a great long letter and tell me all the news that you know. All your friends send a great deal of love to you. This afternoon is Wednesday, and so of course there was spelling and composition. There was a young man who read a composition. The subject was, think twice before you speak. He was describing the reasons why anyone should do so. One was, if a young gentleman offered a young lady his arm and he had a dog who had no tail and he boarded at the tavern, think twice before you speak. Another is if a young gentleman knows a young lady who he thinks nature has formed to perfection, let him remember that roses conceal thorns. He is the silliest creature that ever lived, I think. I told him that I thought he had better think twice before he spoke. What good times we used to have jumping into bed when you slept with me. I do wish you would come close to Amherst and make me a great long visit. How do you get along in Latin? I am the class that you and I used to be in Latin. Besides Latin, I study history and botany. I like the school very much indeed. Your sister sends a great deal of love to all your folks and to everyone she knows there. My plants grow beautifully. You know that eldest old rooster that Austin thought so much of? The other fight him and killed him. Answer this letter as soon as you can. I can think of nothing more to say now. Yours affectionately, Emily. So what are your first thoughts about this letter? Anything you find surprising or notable? Anything that you wanted to comment on? So Bridget says that she's really lively and funny. And she also says that the letter is just wonderful. And I should say too, Rosa mentioned as I was reading the letter, just wow, exclamation point. So Guana mentions that her learning environment was really exciting to her. Sue says that she seems quite outgoing, really observant and friendly. Charlie says that she's really animated in her discussion of friendship in her life. Oh, and Sandy says that she's really sorry that she just got on and she didn't hear it. You know what I can do is I can actually send the transcriptions of these letters out to you all because I have all of your email addresses. So why don't I do that after we're done? And someone else says that she's just so full of life, not what you would expect of a recluse. Yeah, completely. I completely agree. There's really nothing reclusive about that letter. And Dennis says that when she's comfortable, she really opens up. Oh, and Kathy says that she's a great storyteller. Oh, and it's interesting. Mandy just commented that that at the same time, shy people are rarely shy in their writing, which is interesting. So yeah, I wonder what she was actually like in real life. Maybe she just opened up in her writing. And then Paula mentions that it reminds her of the letters from Jane Austen to her sister. So the same kind of tone. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So the next slide that I just put up is the second letter that we're going to be looking at today. So with the magic of Zoom, we have fast forwarded 30 years into the future. This letter was written to Emily's cousin, Nellie Sweetzer. And so now, at this point, Emily is 52 years old. So it's not quite as long as the other letter. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then again, we can share our thoughts and our comments about this letter. So this is early May, 1883. Dear Nellie, I have long been a lunatic on bulbs, though screened by my friends as lunacy on any other theme is better undivulged. But Emerson's intimacy with his bee only immortalized him. They came in happy safety and rest in their subterranean home. Remembrance faithful to her trust brings us in beauty from the dust, their divine perspective, smitten by the sweetness. I only can take those wasted words, thank you, on my lips. We shall tenderly think of you in the foreign home. Were affection dependent on location, this would be an anonymous world. The apple trees lend Vinnie blossoms, which she lends to me, and I pay no interest. Their rosy bank in need of none, and the woods lend Austin trilliums. Shared in the same way, if you will lift your little hands, I will surely fill them, though not agree to let them go, but to that your lovers would not consent. Your great neighbor, the ocean, will see you oftener than I, and I am jealous already of his morning calls. Alice's call is still remembered, and a glance from Nettie in hyacinth time. Emily, with love. So now this is the kind of letter that I think that you would expect Emily Dickinson to write. I love, my favorite line here is that she starts the letter with, I have long been a lunatic. And you think like, oh, she's saying that she's a lunatic. But then she goes on to say she's long been a lunatic on bulbs. But again, definitely closer to what I think you would expect a poet's letter to look like. And I think if I hadn't told you this was a letter and I had just read it without the Dear Nellie, I'm not even sure anybody would know that this was a letter and not a poem. So a few of you have already started commenting on this letter, which is fantastic. Keep that going, and I'll continue to read out these comments. So Mandy says it sounds very queer. Rosa said it's really amazing how different her handwriting is. Yeah, it's completely, I mean, she takes up so much space on the page. That's what I always kind of notice. And obviously, instead of that sort of close penmanship, tight penmanship, it's a lot looser as well. And then Judith mentions that it's 3 years before her death. Not only has the handwriting changed dramatically, but the tone has changed as well. And then Mandy also points out that the handwriting is so different from the last letter. Oh, and Sandy's wondering whether the handwriting maybe changed because she was ill. Not certain. You might be partially right. If you come to the full Emily Dickinson tour that we do at the Rosenbach, we look at a bunch more of the letters from the same time period. And the handwriting is fairly similar. But that is a good point. And someone says it definitely feels like a poem. Strong identification with nature. Yeah. And an unusual way to communicate. And Sue also asked, what did Cornelia think of this? What did Nellie think of this? Her cousin and her friend. Cornelia was the one that saved all of these letters. So I think she really treasured them. I think this was before Emily was discovered, for her poetry. But obviously I think Nellie felt that there was something special here and really saved and treasures all of these letters. And then Peter asks, at some point, could we describe the extent of the Rosenbach's Dickinson holdings? And I can definitely do that, yes. All right. So any other comments about this particular letter, comments or questions? Okay, so as I mentioned before, this is really just a sneak peek into what we have at the Rosenbach. So not only is it a sneak peek of the hands-on tour, the behind the bookcase hands-on tour that we do on Emily Dickinson, um, it's a sneak peek into the collections in general. We have a fantastic Emily Dickinson collection. So not only do I invite you to come back and take the Emily Dickinson behind the bookcase, I also invite you to come back and do research. So you don't have to have a special research card or be affiliated with a university in order to do research at the Rosenbach. So these two letters are actually part of a huge collection of letters that that Emily wrote to Jane Humphrey. So that was that first letter that we looked at. And then we also have a huge collection of letters that were, as I mentioned, that were written to Nellie. So, you know, there's certainly even in the tour that we do on site at the Rosenbach, there's no way that we would have time to sort of pour over all of these letters. So that's something really nice about coming in and doing research, is that ability to really explore those letters. Our librarian, Elizabeth Fuller, who's worked at the Rosenbach for over 35 years at this point, is absolutely fantastic as kind of a steward to sort of help you with these collections. And you really don't need to know a whole lot about what you'd like to see. All you would need to tell her is that you participated in this virtual behind the bookcase tour and you saw a couple of things written by Emily and you'd really love to see more. And Elizabeth can really help you through that. She's absolutely a fantastic librarian. So in addition to Emily Dickinson material, as I said, I'd really love for you to visit us in person, not only to see the Dickinson material, but all sorts of different things that we have available on site. But until we reopen, we've really been making a great effort to put a lot of the collection online. So not only programs like this, like these hands-on tour previews, but also various other resources. So we've got different gallery gateways, which really take the exhibitions, some exhibitions that we'd had open for a while, including the Herman Melville exhibition, but also some exhibitions that had yet to open. We've actually ended up putting those up online. So all of those, the slide that I have up right now is kind of the landing page. So if you visit the Rosenbach's website, which I have the address for right at the top of the screen, you will see this page. And if you hit the button, Start Exploring, you can see all of the different resources that we have available. Oh, so as I was talking, Sandy mentioned that there's a wonderful book recently published by Martha Ackman called These Fevered Days, 10 Pivotal Moments in the Making of Emily Dickinson. So that's something, thank you, Sandy. I had not heard of that book. I'll have to try to find that. So the formal part of today's program is over. So if you need to take off, that's totally fine. If you need to go, feel free to sign off. But if you have additional questions for me, I can definitely stay online for a little bit to chat. So thank you all for participating. I'm really excited. When I started out talking, we had 18 participants, and now it looks like we're up to 31. So that's really exciting. Thank you so much for being a part of this and making this a great first virtual Behind the Bookcase. Okay, so a couple of you were just asking, really interested in the Dickinson materials specifically that the Rosenbach has. So we have some first editions of her works, but I would say that it's not an enormous collection. There certainly are other institutions that have larger collections. but I think it's a real jewel amongst Emily Dickinson materials. So basically, the two major parts of the collection are these two books of letters. So I believe, and Ed, if you're still on, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And Andrew, I think I see you on there as well. But I believe that there are about 75 different letters to Jane Humphreys in this bound collection that we have of letters that was bound obviously after her death. And then the Nellie Sweetzer letters, I believe we have about 50 of those. So again, not a huge collection if you compare it to some other institutions' collections, but still really, I think really, really powerful. And Charlie asks, what are the other letters from Emily? So we've got other letters from different relatives in the collection, but not a huge number. Again, it really is primarily those letters to the Sweetzers and to Jane Humphreys. And then somebody asks what we're doing in the future, if we're doing any of these in the future. The next one that we're doing, we're going to do them on the last Thursday of every month. And the next one that we're doing is 20th Century Gay Lives. And then Kenneth asks, he said, oh, I'm sorry, Kenneth, his Zoom connection keeps cutting out. And will a recording of this be available? Yes, definitely, definitely. I've recorded this, so we'll post this. Oh, and Ed corrected me that it's not, we have about a dozen of those Jane Humphrey letters. And then, of course, the first editions. And Sandy says, just confirming that really any person can just request the books of letters and actually see them. Yes, definitely. So you can't take them off site, but yeah, you basically request, and you don't even have to know exactly what letters you're wanting to look at. Again, you can just tell the librarian, I'd like to see some Emily Dickinson material, and she'll bring that out, and you'll look at that in a room called the reading room at the Rosenbach that is reserved just for that purpose. Oh, and Paul asks, and I didn't mention this, so thank you for asking. Paul asks if there is a cost associated with a research visit, and there is not actually. There are costs associated with visiting the museum, attending programs, things like that. But when you're making a research visit, we really consider that part of our sort of library function. So there is no cost associated with that. What's different though than just visiting the museum is that you do actually have to reserve your time. You can't just walk in and be able to see those materials. So on our website, once we're back open, there will be the ability to make a research appointment. Basically, you just fill out a brief form. And if you know what you'd like to see, you can put that in the form, and then just let us know when you're available to come in and visit. Okay, so I see there's still 14 people on. So any other questions, comments before we sign off and say goodbye till next time? You're welcome, Sandy. This was really fun. Okay, everybody, I'm going to sign off. So thank you again for participating in our first virtual Behind the Bookcase tour on Emily Dickinson. And I hope to see you all again soon, either virtually or on site at the Rosenbach. Take care. Bye.